the chat. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So please let me know if you cannot see my screen. I should be sharing the slideshow for today. Um, and if you can't see or can't hear me at any point during our time together, please send a chat message or you can come off mute and interrupt me. Um, no worries, no worries. What I'm going to do before I start is, oh, recording has started. So we've been recording, right? Maybe I'm recording. Okay. Um, So, first and foremost, thank you all so much for being here. Really, really appreciate it. You taking the time to um, think about quality of life, think about your projects, and I hope we have a good conversation. I hope that you take away some good ideas for how to approach your quality of life issue, and thinking about a solution, thinking about a recommendation. Because one thing I'm always talking about and thinking about is making sure you have the end in mind. What is your ultimate goal? What is your overall aim? What is your hypothesis, right? So as long as we have that vision and have that perspective, then that will help our projects to grow in scale, in execution, and all of these other indicators of success, right? So that's the goal. That's the goal here. So where are we specifically in the QLI process? You always start with identifying a topic, identifying a quality of life issue. Then you move into background research. And then once you've done the history and the background research, you design field research study. And then you conduct field research. And then once you've conducted and analyzed your research data, then you start to think about, okay, now how am I going to solve the problem, right? So we're in this highlighted green area where, or we'll be talking about this highlighted green area. You may not be here yet, which is no problem. Not an issue at all. You have plenty of time, but we're in this, we'll be talking about this highlighted green area here. So analyzing research data and really developing recommendations, developing solutions to address your quality of life issues. And again, if you just showed up, please take a moment in the chat, put what school you're from and a one sentence of your quality of life issue. Okay, and then one other thing I wanted to share too, just very high level, broad overview. Your QLI proposal, this is the research paper that you'll be submitting to the competition, this is what it should look like. So it should have a title page and then a table of contents. Underneath that, you'll have a summary, which is at least half a page, which details your entire process. This should be written at the end of the year. And then after that, you have your background research section, which hopefully you've drafted or finalized by this point. Um, but this has to be at least 3 pages long, and it explores really the history of your particular quality of life issue or what other people are working on related to your quality of life issue. After this section, you have the research and analysis section. This must be 3 pages minimum as well. And this is where you show your research plan and you go into the data analysis. You say, for my research, for my field research, I'm doing a survey research design where I'm surveying high school students in South Brooklyn to assess their feelings and thoughts on winter, just the season, right? So, and then you'll turn and say, and we conducted a study of 300 high school seniors in South Brooklyn and found that 24% of them liked the winter, while 76% of them disliked the winter, and so on and so forth. Um, After that section, then number 4 right here is your recommendation section. This has to be 1 page minimum. So this is where you connect to your research. You say, based on my research, based on the data that I've analyzed, these are my recommendations. Or I recommend this to address the quality of life issue based on the data that I've gathered, right? So based on the the data that 76% of high school seniors dislike the winter time, my recommendation is to plan more social events during the winter time as opposed to the springtime to help them find some enjoyment in other aspects of life, right? And then after your recommendations, and this is in the future, our next webinar will discuss this, or next couple webinars, the implementation. It's related to the recommendation, um, but the implementation is actually what you do. So the recommendation, I think of it as what you say, while the implementation is what you do, right? So in the example I gave, the recommendation is um, planning more social events during the winter time. The implementation is actually how I did that. So maybe I started a club, a winter social club. I developed uh, a handbook of event creation and event management and planning. And then I connected with the Department of Education to make sure that every high school has a version of this club using my materials. So those three things could be part of my implementation, right? Um, and then after your implementation, then you'll have a financial implications section. This has to be 1 page minimum. This is where you'll discuss the cost of doing your recommendations, of solving the problem. How much money did it cost you? How much money would it cost you? Imagine for this that you're writing for another school to copy or to implement your ideas. So, what would they need to know to do your implementation? What would another school need to know to create my club and to lead this type of club, for example? And then lastly, you have a conclusion section, which summarizes all of your work, references, and an appendix. Now, real quick, your references, you need to have seven, at least seven secondary sources, which are scholarly articles, could be books, could be video clips, documentaries, photographs, and you need at least one primary source. And this could be an interview you conducted, a survey you conducted, an experiment that you yourself conducted. Um, but you need at least one of those and at least seven of the secondary sources. And if you want to go, if you're interested to hear in more detail about the sources, about the references, um, I went into a lot more detail, I believe 3 webinars ago, and all of the recordings are on the Student Resources Hub, so you can find them there. Okay, so we're specifically again looking at the recommendation section. So I want to show you the rubric that your proposals will be graded on by the judges. And this I think is really important to utilize when you're writing your recommendations, when you're coming up with recommendations, just to make sure you get all points possible. So the recommendation section is graded in 4 different sections. So the first one is research findings support the recommendation. This is your connector. So does your data turn into recommendations, right? Are you basing your recommendations on the data that you collected? Point blank, period. Oops. So a lot of, we'll see some examples of how students have connected their data to their recommendations, but it's pretty explicit. Um, Secondly, description of the recommendation is clear. So is your writing clear? Are you explaining thoroughly what you propose doing or what you propose will solve the quality of life issue? The third section, which I've highlighted here, is feasibility of the recommendation based on information provided. And this part is really interesting. So your solution has to be feasible and has to be something that can be accomplished, right? So it can't be like, um, well, if we took samples on Jupiter, then we would be able to compare the nitrogen levels here and there. That's something that we can't necessarily do. Um, well, maybe depending. Or on Pluto, for example. Um, it's not something that's feasible. Um, so it probably wouldn't get those points. So think about feasibility in your recommendations. Because remember, recommendations, this is all talk. These are your ideas for how to solve the problem. And then the next step is actually doing them. So make sure that you're coming up with solutions and ideas that you can actually accomplish. Um, and this can be supported, like feasibility can be supported by including letters of support. So some students, one of their recommendations have been to lobby the state Senate or the state House of Representatives or even local city councils, and they supported their feasibility by including communications and letters from council members or state senators, saying, yes, I really support this, and I feel like this is a quality of life issue, yada yada. Right? So all any data that you have showing that you have support and that this is possible, include that in your proposal. Put it in the appendix section, right? And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. The last section that your recommendation will be graded on is innovation. So what this means is that you really display an out-of-the-box thinking. So and this is vague on purpose, because every project is different, out of the box looks different for each quality of life issue. But in this section, I really want you to think about scalability and impact. So, am I having a larger impact, or am I just impacting like 5 people? Innovation, how can we build on what's already being done to to approach the quality of life issue in a different way, right? Because the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over, expecting the same result. And you do not want to be insane. You don't want to be insane. Um, we don't want to fall into that cycle of insanity. So think about what's already been done and how you can build on or change it, right? In this new way. And of course that looks different based on your own project. Okay, so we're going to go into some examples. And I want to again just highlight the recommendation section has to be 1 page minimum, and there are 4 questions that you need to answer. Number one, what is your recommendation? What is it? Number two, what results from your field research indicate the need for the recommendation? So this is again that connection, building off your data analysis. What led you to these ideas? Number three, what are the potential obstacles? So this shows me you're thinking ahead, thinking about what will be difficult in the implementation. And then number four, what do you expect your recommendation to accomplish? What is the desired outcome or the desired result? Okay. So you need to answer all 4 of these questions in 1 or more pages. And this proposal's Shell, Students Helping English Language Learners, they were the 3rd place winner last year. And I wanted to highlight this. This is their recommendation section. And I highlighted this sentence because it really shows the connection piece of it. They say, our primary research confirmed our secondary research, and our solution was clear. We had to implement a program that would assist ELL students with their academic transition to high school. So this is a very clear way of connecting their recommendation based to the data that they collected, right? Our research confirmed this, and our solution was clear. What is your solution? We have to implement a program that will assist ELL students, right? So they've got, boom, two answers right away, right away. And, ah, oops. And something else that really helps a recommendation section to stand out um, is that it's detailed and clear. So you go in enough detail to fully explain your recommendation, and you're explaining it in a way that makes sense to a general audience, right? Because remember, you are the expert. You are the expert, but all of the judges reading your proposal may not be an expert. They may not know what you're talking about or what this issue is, right? So it's your job as this writer to bring them in and help them understand. Secondly, it has to be realistic. We talked about feasibility. That is huge for this project and this piece of the project. And then number three, it has to be creative. So are you thinking outside of the box? Are you building on what's already been done, right? And then some questions to think about and to consider after you write this. And as you're reflecting and editing this section, think about how does my recommendation relate to the quality of life issue? Have I really drawn that connection? What will my recommendation accomplish? For whom? So this is getting you to think a little bit more outside the box, thinking about impact and scalability. What are the potential obstacles? This is something really important for you to consider and to write about to show us that you're thinking critically and thinking ahead. How does your research support your recommendation? So making sure that you have that clear line from my research, from my data, the recommendation was clear. I had to do these things, or I should do these things. And then lastly, is there currently support for your proposed solution? So this gets to feasibility also. Have you reached out to other organizations? Have you reached out to your council members or any other important people that can help you implement your recommendation, right? So these questions will be really helpful in the review process as you're making sure that the recommendation is tied to your data and you're getting all of those, all the possible points in the rubric and in the grading process. Okay, so now we're going to move into some examples of recommendations, but first, are there any questions about anything we've gone over so far? And if you have questions, you can throw them in the chat, um, or feel free to come off mute, or you can use the raise your hand feature, whatever you feel most comfortable with. But I'm going to continue, and we're going to go into some examples, examples of recommendations. So these first few examples are just kind of general, but some ways that you can address your quality of life issue are to develop or create a product, right? So one of the examples that I'll talk about in the next couple slides, a finalist from last year, their recommendation was a water filtration system. And so they developed a product that that came from their research. Other projects in the past have developed masks, so they developed a product based on their research, and then also an energy capturing device that captures the kinetic energy from walking on tiles, right? So all of these projects developed a product or a thing that addressed the quality of life issue. The second one, get a commitment for funding to implement your idea. So this could be through a partnership with maybe an outside organization or a partnership with your local, with your city council or your maybe you're working with the borough president's office and just seeing if they'll fund your idea, right? So see if there's any support, if they can give you a letter of support. for bringing your idea to life. And then the third point, create and start a program, um, including written materials, right? So to start an effective program, which uh, a lot of successful projects in the past have done, they've made sure that their program is replicable. So a big piece of this type of recommendation is making sure that it can be done in other schools in the city, right? So if you're developing a program, if you're developing a maybe a club or something, um, think about how you can spread your ideas, right? Mina, you have a question?
Yeah, hi. I have a question. It's for get a commitment for funding to implement your idea. Does that mean like having a, for instance, like if I want to create a group, I have to get prior funding in order for this group to happen? Does it like mean that, or does it mean like partnerships with between big organizations and yourself?
Hmm, good question. Great question. So it could mean both, but I think it definitely depends on your recommendation. So for the example of starting a club or starting a group at your school, um, if there is funding required, this could be as simple as asking maybe your assistant principal or your QLI teacher if there's funding available at your school to maybe buy snacks or buy supplies for this club. Um, and also, if your idea is to maybe start a nonprofit or to start something on a larger scale in your borough, then public funds may be available through the local city council, the local council. Um, so it could mean that as well. Um, but I think it definitely does depend on your recommendation. And if you're thinking about a school-based program or a school-based club, think within your school. So maybe approaching an assistant principal to see if there's available funds. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
No problem. And great question. Good clarification. Um, And then the last bullet point is create and market an app, website, or video. So I've seen a lot of QLI projects come through, and their recommendation is a awareness campaign. And they do this through a website, they do this through a social media blast. Um, and these are great ways to connect with hundreds of people is a TikTok campaign, a website that you can share to your entire school or outside of your school walls. Um, but I want to mention too, and this is a great way to implement or to spread awareness, but I want to, what I would say is the best proposals that come through, the most successful ones, build on multiple things. They have multiple recommendations. Um, so it's not just that they're creating a website, they're doing a website and a social media campaign, and maybe they're leading an assembly at their school to educate their fellow students. So think about how you can build on different recommendations or add together, combine different ideas to have a large impact and to really be as innovative as possible. Okay. So some more examples, and this one is to train senior citizens to use the internet. This 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 quality of life issue. Um, so for your recommendation for your implementation, you really want to have a very good idea in your recommendation section of listing out how and what you're going to do, right? So an idea to organize this is to create a plan or a list of steps. And for this proposal, they did just that. So they identified a senior center. They identified necessary resources to train senior citizens how to use the internet. I guess nowadays it would be like train senior citizens how to use ChatGPT, or TikTok. So identify a senior center, identify necessary resources. Could be equipment, could be training, staff, food, transportation. Schedule the training sessions and recruit senior citizens. So these are four bullet points, where uh, four bullet points of the recommendation in order to implement it, right? That was identified. Um, and this is their plan. This is their recommendation. Um, it's always important also to make sure that you're discussing your plans and sharing them with your QLI teacher and with the school administrator if um, uh, uh, with the school administrator and your QLI teacher to um, see if they have any ideas, right? They may have worked with senior centers. They may have ideas for developing a program. They may have done that themselves and can be a great resource for your project, right? So make sure that you always talk to the your QLI teacher and anyone else at your school that can be a resource and support your recommendation and implementation. And I want to read this comment real quick too. Um, it says, note that if you have an app or a website, it should be accessible by the reader of your proposal. Data on whether people in your target population are accessing your app or website gives greater credibility that you are making an impact. Absolutely. Um, So make sure in your proposal in the document you upload that the person reading it can access your website, can access your app so that it's make sure it's hyperlinked. Um, excuse me. And then also making sure that you have metrics, right? You're collecting data based on the users or who's using your app, who's visiting your website, so that you can put this into your proposal and say, I'm having a huge impact in Queens and Brooklyn, and here's my data, right? Um, all of these, all of these data points give you more credibility and give you more of an argument to say, yes, I am having an impact. Very good. Okay, so some two more examples. This proposal is called Tea Time Tech, Art, Anxiety, and the Power of Digital Expression. This is from a finalist last year. And her quality of life issue is anxiety and the mental health crisis in high school students specifically. So she did background research on the growing mental health crises, and in her particular school, she did field research, um, just assessing levels of anxiety and levels of depression. And she really wanted to intervene there and create a space where students didn't necessarily feel the pressure of school or feel the anxiety related to schoolwork. Um, and so this is her recommendation section. And I'm just going to read the first sentence because I think it's a really, really great example of um, of opening your recommendation section. But before I do, remember there are four questions that you have to answer as part of your recommendation. I'm going to go back real quick. What are they? They are number one, what is your recommendation? Number two, what results from your field research indicate the need for the recommendation? Number three, what are the potential obstacles you could face? And number four, what do you expect your recommendation to accomplish? Okay. So now that we have those in mind, she says to address the persistent stress and anxiety faced by high school students, my recommended solution is the expansion and formal integration of Tea Time Tech, a digital art therapy initiative into school wellness programs across New York City high schools, starting with my school, of course. So she starts off this section really strong. What are we addressing? The stress and anxiety, persistent stress and anxiety faced by high school students. That's the issue. And my recommended solution is what? The expansion and formal integration of Tea Time Tech. What is Tea Time Tech, you may ask? A digital art therapy initiative into school wellness programs. So we get from the jump, what is your plan? What is your recommendation? Right? And then what data from your research led to this? And she's addressing the persistent stress and anxiety faced by high school students, right? So these are both questions here are really answered. And she goes in a little bit more detail too of the initiative also features an interactive aesthetic website containing information and resources, a quote, Hall of Fame for art and engagement tools such as buttons that lead to specific links, creating an accessible ecosystem of support tailored for students. And so she further explains what, in addition to Tea Time Tech, is part of her recommendation. So she has Tea Time Tech, a digital art therapy initiative. We also have a website with resources and engagement tools. And this is a great place where you could link, if you have a website yourself, link it in the document so that whoever is reviewing your proposal will be able to access it as well. And then in addition, so she continues on, and this is another paragraph. Remember the last two questions, potential obstacles and expected outcomes. She says, potential obstacles include ensuring equitable device access for all students and securing funding for prize incentives and program materials. So she's thinking about accessibility and she's thinking about equity in this recommendation, and also thinking about funding because she has prizes as part of this initiative. And so, where do I get funding? Getting funding may pose an issue. And then expected outcome, if implemented thoughtfully and with student voices at the center, TTT, can strengthen emotional well-being, foster community, and create space for expression in high schools. So this is a great way to end the section on a high note with your expected outcomes. She says it can strengthen emotional well-being, foster community, and create space for expression in high schools, right? So she has all of these parts. What is this? What from your research led to this? What are some obstacles that you can foresee? And then what are your expected outcomes? And we'll go into a second example. Oh, and I have a question in the chat. If we write an issue brief, do we have to add a recommendation section as well? Um, uh, yes. For your issue brief, you do have to write a recommendation section. It's not going to be as long as this, however, but you have to list out some of your recommendations for action, right? So it doesn't have to be as detailed, does not have to be as lengthy as these, but you do have to identify some recommendations to address the quality of life issue. Okay, so this proposal is about microparticles in the water. So they said the concentration of the community is positively related or positively correlated to the amount of microparticles in the water. So if the population goes up, the microparticle concentration will go up, is their hypothesis. And they did research by testing the concentration of microparticles in waters in Staten Island, Brooklyn, and Manhattan. Um, and they found through their data analysis that there was a correlation between population density and microparticle concentration in the water. And so this is their recommendation section. Um, and remember the first two questions, what data from your research led to this? And detail exactly what you plan to do. And I have at a high level. So at a very broad, it doesn't have to be very precise, pages on pages. It does not have to be that. Just what do you plan to do? And they say, sorry, get a sip of water. They say to decrease the number of microparticles released into natural bodies of water, we recommend the use of soil-based filters to separate microparticles from washed effluent. As mentioned before, microparticles are introduced into the environment through waste released by appliances like washing machines. So in this first section here, they have what they plan to do. So what is your recommendation? A soil-based filter. And what data from your research led to this? So they say, as mentioned before, microparticles are introduced in the environment through waste released by washing machines. They continue on to say, 6 kilograms of laundry releasing around 18 million strands of microplastics. Despite this, current filters designed for catching microplastics in laundry machines, wash water, have been shown to be ineffective with only 19.7 to 24.8% removal efficiency. So they include the data, they include their background research data in this section as well. So we have what data from your research led to this and exactly what do you plan to do? And then the last two questions, remember are potential obstacles and expected outcomes. So they do this in a very nice way. Also at the end, they say some of the barriers to implementing this method is the cost and labor needed to install these filters to stand pipes and outfall pipes connected to laundry machines. Because it can be expensive. You got to hire somebody, you got to unhook the hose, you got to like pull the wash machine, many things. Um, and they have a solution to that issue. They said, due to this, we also intend to write a letter to our representative asking them to take action at a higher level. Maybe states and governments can subsidize this process or the creation by requiring these filtration systems. Maybe. Anyway, and then expected outcomes. Encouraging everybody to take part, minimizing single-use plastics, air drying. Sorry. State government programs can introduce policies that create educational programs, encouraging everyday people to take part in the solution through steps such as minimizing single-use plastics, air dry clothes when possible, recycling properly, and buying goods that use less packaging. So this could be an expected outcome of this statewide education initiative, right? Or educational programming. And that is that example. There are a couple more things I want to touch on, but again, if you have a question, you can use the raise your hand feature, throw it in the chat, or just come off mute. Um, so I mentioned working with other organizations or connecting with individuals at your school level or at your government, state government, or local government level. So these are things to think about when you're in this phase of the project, broadening your scope and your area of influence, right? Think about how local government offices or officials could support your project. Maybe they have a stake in it and they want to support a student-led initiative. These could be city council members, these could be borough presidents. Also think about college professors. College professors last year, the first place winner in the competition connected with professors at Mount Sinai, and he worked closely with them to develop his recommendation and implementation, right? So professors are a great resource as well. And then community-based organization leaders as well. These could be local nonprofits. These could be local, like community board, government community board leaders as well. So really just doing the research about your community is very helpful in identifying who may be of assistance. Um, and then as you're reporting on your recommendation, as you're writing this section, drafting this section, some things to think about are for you to explain exactly what you did. So be very precise. Don't just say, well, we did kind of this, we had like half of this done. Be very detailed, very precise. Remember, other schools may use your work to develop a similar project or similar program. Number two, give information on who, where, when, and how. This goes into being detailed and being specific. Identify challenges and successes, right? So What are potential obstacles and how will you address them? Share any data that explains your outcomes. So again, making sure that your recommendation is connected to the data, the field research that you've done, the background research that you've done that's very important. And then provide proof. Do you have communication with administrators at your school that they're interested in developing this program? Do you have emails or letters from teachers who are interested in running your committee? Anything like that. Add proof. Take pictures, screenshots, videos, and add them to your proposal. And then lastly, think of your next steps. Is there more to do? Will there be more to do down the line? And how do we keep this rolling, right? And then so all of this, the proof, the emails, pictures, screenshots, these will all go in your appendix, include the evidence of your recommendation, of your connections, of your communications, which we'll talk about in more detail in the next webinar, which is in 2 weeks on February 3rd, 2026 at 5 p.m. And this is where we will stop for today. This is all I have for you. It went a bit longer than I anticipated. My apologies, but I hope you got a lot out of this and have started to think about your specific quality of life issue and how you are interested in addressing it. Next steps, please take a moment to fill out this attendance form. Um, because again, every time you attend one of these webinars, your name gets entered into a drawing for specific recommendation for a prize and recognition at our award ceremony in June, right? So make sure you're attending these webinars, participate as much as you would like. I'm here to support you in your development of your quality of life projects. Um, so if you have any additional questions, if you would like to if you have any additional questions, you can stick around and ask specifically about your issue, your quality of life issue, your recommendations. I am here for the next couple of minutes, but if you don't have any questions, and you are finished filling out the attendance form, you are free to go. Have a good evening, and I will see you next time. I'm going to end the recording. Ta-da.